It is 5 Things We Learned with me, Beth Lindop, joined today by Adam Smith to discuss the 5 things we learned from Liverpool 1, PSV Eindhoven 4. Adam, there was a point at half-time in the press room, and obviously Liverpool at half-time were drawing 1-1, and I said to one of my colleagues, I think it'll finish 4-1. It was prophetic, but not in the way that I had imagined. I mean, it's the sort of scoreline that is, it's just inconceivable, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just end it there, really.
I think I think the problem is that at the moment with this current run of form, it's sort of not inconceivable.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking at half time, it'd be really good for where we are at the moment to have gone behind and come back and win, because that's what we obviously haven't been doing. It's whoever scores the first goal wins, basically, in Liverpool matches. So I was thinking if we can, we've got back in 1-1. Stupid penalty to give away, but we've just overturned it. And I thought we looked really good. Like I said on social media, I thought we looked really good. And people were like, really good? Don't think so. But I was like, but I did. I thought in that first half we looked really good. We were dominating the game. They looked a little bit on the ropes, and it really felt like, okay, if we can turn this game around and get a win on the board, it'll just lift the mood a little bit. And then by full time, there's conversations about whether the manager should be sacked. That's just that's a hell of a turnaround. Not the one I wanted when we were 1-0 down.
And I think for me, I sort of felt like that PSV game wasn't that significant in terms of this run that Liverpool were on, in the sense that I expected that they'd win, and I think even if they won, it wouldn't necessarily have had a massive bearing on things going forward. But the fact that they lost, and they lost in such a manner, means it does matter now. It did matter, and like you say, we're at a point now where the manager is being questioned. Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. I think I had exactly that thought going into the game, of thinking, and to be honest, also that when I was thinking about if we can come back from 1-0 down, I was a bit thinking, but it just doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't mean anything, because we'll then go to West Ham and they'll be what they are, and the Premier League is where we've fallen apart. You know, we beat Real Madrid, for God's sake, and that didn't seem to make any impact. So I was thinking the Champions League feels like its own beast. But it's weird that when you lose, that's not the case anymore. It's not its own little island, which it was if we'd have won, or which I'd have thought it was when we won. And yeah, instead the manager is rightly under a lot of pressure, because you can't have the form that we've had and not have people talking about your position and whether you should stay the manager. And I think, you know, we can't act as though just because he won the league he gets a free pass. You know, we could be in the relegation zone and we're coming towards the end of the season. And, well, he won the league last season. You know, we can't do that. I do think winning the league gives him grace, perhaps more grace than some people are willing to afford him. But as soon as it went 4-1, well, I mean, as soon as it looked like it was clear we were losing, the thing where I'm looking at it, how I'm looking at it really is, something needs to change, and I don't know what it's going to be if it's not the manager, because he's not sending them out to lose. You know what I mean? Like he is giving what he thinks is a plan to go and win every game, but it's not working. Now it might not be working for a wealth of reasons, which we're going to come on to, but ultimately it's not working. And so if you're in charge of the club, you look and go, well, something needs to change, and the only thing that we can look and say that's what we'll do is the manager, or he needs to think, is the backroom team I'm working with right? You know, they brought in Van Bronckhorst in the summer, didn't they? And you know, as somebody said to me on social media, he got sacked as Rangers manager. Like that's his level, if you like. You know, and look, we know from other previous things that Pep Lijnders, for example, other assistants that Liverpool have had in the past, that sometimes people have their level and they're just not cut out to be a manager, but they can be an excellent assistant manager. So saying he got sacked from Rangers isn't really telling the full story. But I think that's about the only thing I can look at and go, maybe that's where we've gone wrong. You know, Heitinga, perfect example, won the league with Liverpool last season, sacked by Ajax within 4 months or something like that. So I think it's a real issue. But But at the moment, it seems like stasis. Nothing seems to be changing at all. And so that's why you look and go, well, then the manager's really on thin ice.
Yeah, well, that leads us on to our first point, which is Arne Slot is in trouble. I mean, I think that the Nottingham Forest game was the first game really where I felt, he's under real pressure here. I know the club have very much sort of tried to back him, and he still feels like he has the backing of the club hierarchy. But like you say, you get to a point where something has to change, and a position becomes untenable. When for you, if we've not already reached that point, does that position come?
I think we have to win our next 2 games to for him to really face any chance whatsoever of surviving this. I think we have to win our next 2 games. I think, look, when the full-time whistle went on Wednesday night, I did a TikTok where I was like, I don't know what else we can do now. Like, I haven't wanted him sacked, and I don't want him sacked. That's not the right phrase. And my biggest fear, to be honest, Beth, is that we sack him, and then the next fella comes in and he can't do much better either, because I think the reasons why we're going as wrong as we're going are several-fold, and I don't think sacking the manager that's the solve all to the situation. So it's a really tricky scenario that we're in, where the best thing that could happen is that he begins to turn it round, and there's some evidence to suggest that could happen. Like, I saw a thing on Blue Sky. I always get to call them tweets, but then somebody tells me they're not tweets. But anyway, James York put a thing up about our underlying numbers. I know people don't like underlying numbers and everything, but our expected goals are the same as last year. I think it's 1.5 expected goals a game, and that is the same as after 12 games last year.
Right.
The expected goals against were 0.8 last year, and they're 1.1 this year, so they're roughly where they were. So underlying numbers-wise, we're not that different to where we were last year. And I'm sure I've said this to you before, one of the things people hate talking about in football is luck. But Arne Slot has had some fucking terrible luck so far this season. The number of things you could point to and get, even you could use the game against PSV as a little microcosm of that this season.
Yeah.
Virgil van Dijk throwing his arm in the air when the ball, that's moronic, and he can protest at the referee all he wants, but it is as nailed on a penalty as you're going to get in the Champions League. It just is one.
Yeah.
That is, you cannot expect your talented, experienced, title and Champions League winning captain to throw his arm in the air like that when a corner comes in. The referee not giving a penalty for the foul on Ekitike, and VAR also not saying it. That is just mind-boggling. That's the most nailed-on penalty I've seen. He just takes him out. That's just a penalty, but doesn't get given. And that's happened previously. The goal against Manchester City, which is ruled off, and then a week later we get one against us that's allowed because the other one was ruled. Like, those things, it stinks. Like, that is just, that kind of luck is just awful. So a few things going in our favour, and all of a sudden you win your next 2, and the opposition in West Ham and Sunderland are the exact 2 teams that you're looking at and going, Christ, I don't want to play them. I do not want to play them in this world where long balls and balls into the box are the thing, it seemed to be our kryptonite. Yeah. If we can come out of those 2 games with wins and maybe a little bit of fortune, then all of a sudden it does feel like that we've put the brakes on and we're slowly starting to turn the juggernaut around. If we lose both of them, he can't stay.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that there's several problems at Liverpool at the moment, and I think one of them, and our thing number 2, is that Liverpool have a mentality problem. And again, you said earlier on that it tends to happen this season. If Liverpool score the first goal, they win. If they don't, then the opposition win. I think it's only once that they've come from behind this season to take anything, and that was against Frankfurt in the Champions League, having gone behind 10 times. It's pretty damning, particularly for a team that previously have been so good. It's been one of the biggest strengths under both Slot and Klopp, that they're resilient, they can respond to adversity. What do you put that down to? It's a big question, but what do you think?
Look, I think it is impossible to talk about what's happening at Liverpool this season, and especially what's happening to them mentality-wise, without talking about Diogo Jota and his passing in the summer and what that will have done to all of them. So every single player, everybody associated with the club, all of them. And I have heard some people say, you know, oh, you can't use it as an excuse. But if I can talk briefly about my own life, be a bit self-indulgent for a second. When I was diagnosed with MS, I lost my head completely. I fell off the rails. I started having suicidal thoughts. I was represented by an agent at the time, really good agent. And I was like, well, there's no point. They don't know how to represent disabled artists. So I said to them, I'm leaving you, left them and signed with an agency that specialised in disabled actors. And I should never have signed for them because they specialise in actors that use wheelchairs and, you know, those sorts of things. It was never the right decision, but I just completely lost the rails for about 6 months until I had some counselling and got on antidepressants, and I really went all over the show for maybe 6 months or so. And that was one thing for me in a personal sense that I suffered, and it was nowhere near as devastating as what these players and that the club as a whole went through with Diogo Jota and everything that surrounds that. And when I was going through that period myself, I couldn't stub my toe without thinking the world was against me. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like every single thing was, well, that's because, but you know, just the universe hates me or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like everything was just me. I was really, really down on myself, and it was all because I was feeling just really, really negative about everything. And they have lost a friend, a colleague, and somebody in a scenario where they could look and go, that could have been me. Could have been me. I could have been driving home because I've had an injury, you know, I had surgery on something and being told to drive home. Like there's so many things where you look at it and go, of course they're struggling. Of course, any little tiny bit of adversity for a lot of the people in that squad will feel like the house of cards has caved in. And to ignore that and to pretend that's not, you know, to just be like, oh, you can't keep using that as an excuse is ridiculous in my opinion, because I almost can't see any other explanation for it, if you like. Like we're talking about something, you know, trigger warning, etc. But the manner in which he died was horrific. I've thought about it, you know, in the past, and I didn't know the guy. I didn't know the fella. So I did the audiobook for James Pearce's Walk On, and there's a section on Diogo Jota, and I had to keep stopping during the recording and saying to the producer, I'm really sorry, I just need a second here, because I was tearing up reading about all the things and everything. I never met him, don't know, you know, no idea about him at all. But that's how I felt just reading about what people were saying about him and things like that. So you've got a bunch of people that know him, and there are loads of things that I think have been done with the best possible intentions. You know, somebody said that there's a photo of him, I think, is it in the locker room or at the tunnel? So it's the last thing they see when they walk out onto the pitch. The fans singing the song on 20 minutes. The idea of I've never lost anybody particularly close to me, right? But I know from people who have, they'll say things like, oh, I'll go to phone her, or if I go to phone my mum, or I'll go to text my dad, whatever it is. You're on the football pitch and you think, we need Jota. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's just an instinctive thing that they'll be thinking when you're a goal down. Slot said it. Slot should have turned to the bench, and, you know, I wanted to pick him, but I couldn't. All of those things are there. When people suffer a loss, rightly or wrongly, what a lot of people will do is throw themselves into work, because that's like, I can distract myself with work. They can't do that. They can't, you know, like, and so everything, like, it's just one thing. It just builds and builds and builds and builds. And I think, so I'm a little bit sanguine about Liverpool's results this season. And I know a lot of people won't want to hear it. And I know a lot of people won't like that. And that's totally fine. I'm not saying I'm right. It's just how I'm dealing with it. Because I'm looking at it and thinking, I think they'd be fucking great just to get out on the football pitch. I really do. Just to get out there and perform and to do anything in the wake of what's happened. When I was diagnosed with MS, I struggled to do anything. Like, I really, the feelings that I was having it was like a pressure cooker just building up and up and up and up and up, and I needed a release valve to sort of let that go. And it was things like stupid things, like I was feeling like when I was, having suicidal thoughts, I was like, I can't talk to my wife about this because she will never leave the house. You know what I mean? She'll never let me be on my own. I can't talk to my friends about this because nobody really lives near me, and I don't want to put that pressure on them and things like that. And we had Andy Robertson in the wake of the Scotland game come out and say how heavily he'd been impacted by Jota and how much he'd been thinking about him that week and blah, blah, blah. And everybody just dismissed it almost immediately. I was like, that's a player crying out about the issues that he is having. And all of them will be having their own things with that. I think, we've seen it with Salah. I think Salah has looked a shadow of the man this season. And so maybe the players are struggling to take on board what the manager is asking them to do. Maybe, and the other thing, I will stop talking in a minute, but the other thing as well is we talk about the players in the sense of the loss of Jota, but we don't really think about the manager. He knew him. All right, he didn't know him as well as Jurgen knew him. He didn't know him as well as the players knew him, perhaps. He maybe wasn't having dinner with his family and all that sort of thing, but he knew him. And he worked with him, and he will have had plans for how to use him. And he lost him. So there's just so much, I think, that I just look at and go, no wonder they're struggling mentality-wise, and no wonder every time something goes against them, it feels like the absolute world is caving in on them because to an extent it did.
Yeah, no, I can completely agree with you, and I think the difficult thing is trying to reconcile that with the sort of the emotion that you feel as football fans and you want a team to do well. And I think on Wednesday night, we saw that Anfield was getting a little bit restless at times, even early on in the game. And thing number 3 is Anfield wants more. There were a few boos at the full-time whistle on Wednesday, still in the minority very much, and there was a number of fans who were still trying to get behind the team. But I think when you get to that point, it's difficult to see a manager coming back from that, because we very rarely see it at Liverpool. I mean, I'm sort of the opinion that I don't think that's ever the way to go in terms of booing, but I understand people pay money for tickets and it's entirely up to them how they want to respond. But I think that's the difficult thing at the moment as well, is at a time when you feel like you want Anfield to be really behind the team because of the results and things like that, it's not quite what you would like it to be.
Yeah, what's interesting, I wasn't there, I was watching on the telly, but what's interesting was when we went a goal behind, I was thinking, oh God, what's Anfield going to be like now? There's going to be all sorts of... But the atmosphere seemed quite good, actually. And for the rest of the first half, I thought the atmosphere was there. It was up. They were getting behind the players. But I think when you're supporters, I guess, you will do whatever you can to get behind the team. But there's only so much you can do. And ultimately, people want to express their disappointment and their anger and their feeling that almost send a message to the Liverpool hierarchy of this, we're not accepting this isn't okay, that maybe silence or just applause or whatever, you wouldn't send that message. I during all the controversy, if you like, around the booing of Trent Alexander-Arnold, my point was supporters are entitled to show their disappointment and disapproval in a player in the manner in which he's gone about what he went about. So I had no problem with people booing. I didn't boo myself. I was there. I booed an Arsenal player who shouldn't have been playing for them, and we know why now in Thomas Partey. I booed him when he was on the ball, but I didn't boo Trent. But I wasn't going to have a go at people who did, because I understood. When you're physically there, you need... Even people who don't go the game, if you're watching on the telly, I still will shout at things, and so because you almost can't stop yourself. So I'm not surprised that there was a little bit of anger and disappointment in Anfield. That being said, I think ultimately the crowd was as good as it could be, but it just can't last forever. You can't go along to the game and be like, yeah, this is fine, don't worry about it forever. And that's, I think, losing Anfield is the other, you said before, where would I say the line has to be drawn? And I think once Anfield starts to turn, I think it's almost impossible to get that back.
Yeah, well, let's have a bit of positivity now. And thing number 4 is. Szoboszlai is the saving grace. I mean, there was a point when he scored where I just thought, where would Liverpool be without him this season? Not just in terms of the goal that he scored, but I think, the one thing that a lot of fans are crying out for is just a little bit more intensity, a little bit more passion, a little bit more feeling like the players are putting absolutely everything they possibly can into it. And he is, if any of his teammates are looking for someone to turn to for an example of what the level required in terms of that effort and that intensity, I think he is it.
Definitely, yeah. And look, he's in an incredible vein of form at the moment. I think he's been our player of the season, I think, by some distance. I don't think there's anybody else that really comes close to him. I think he's been absolutely brilliant to watch. As you say, his dynamism, his getting around the pitch, is everything that you could ask for. He's the captain of Hungary, isn't he? And he's bringing that captaincy role to Liverpool almost. He's like the captain without the armband, and that that's great. And I think the part of the issue we've had is that he's been on his own, really. Because I think McAllister has had a dreadful season. I think he's had maybe 2 good games that were maybe the 2 that we've won against Villa and Real. But I thought again on Wednesday night, I thought he was poor. McAllister, he did one brilliant thing where he turned and he lost about 4 players and just immediately passed the ball to them. And so Szoboszlai must be looking around thinking, do us a favour, will you? Like, I'm busting a gut here. And you can't even find a fella in red. They're not even like the similar kits. Like, that must be really frustrating for him. So the fact that he's able to kind of keep going and almost show the level that you need to be at. I think Gravenberch has also not been at his best recently. I think he's maybe struggled a little bit. I think the only other player that I think has maybe been operating at a similar level to Szoboszlai is Curtis Jones. I think he's been really good when he's appeared. I thought he did really well the other night. He was, even though he was at right back, and some of the stats that he was getting when he was playing, where he had like 98% pass completion ratio and things like that. But the manager's not picking him enough to really be able to say, the 2 of them are the shining lights. So. Yeah, Szoboszlai has been absolutely brilliant this season. A really top-notch addition to the midfield, and he's setting a level that if the others could reach, there would be hope for us getting something out of this season yet.
Big if. We'll finish it off then with thing number 5, and that is the next week is massive. I mean, you mentioned it; it's almost impossible for a manager to recover after they've lost Anfield, but you feel like if he's got any chance of doing it, it will be across these next 3 games. Jamie Carragher in the Telegraph this week said that he's got 3 games, or he's got a week to save his job with encompassing those 3 games of West Ham, Sunderland and Leeds. 3 games that if Liverpool were operating at the normal level, you would say they were absolute favourites to win.
Yeah.
At the moment, you wouldn't fancy them to beat anyone, being quite frank. But if somehow he could manage to get a win at the weekend and then go into that Sunderland game and have Anfield, bouncing again and scoring a couple of goals and keeping a clean sheet maybe, then I think that's the point where you could say, right, okay, we've got something we could build on here.
Yeah, and look, I think the biggest concern, question mark, from my end is that it feels like we've just been doing the same thing again and again and again and again up to, and I know he's done chops and changes. Like, I know the defence hasn't really been settled, but that's been more injury based than anything else. But that feeling of we're just doing the same thing every time and nothing is different. I think the manager needs to take a few risks. I think he needs to make a few decisions. If Joe Gomez is fit enough to play, he needs to come in for Konate, because I can't. There are too many players in this team who have not been performing all season long and yet keep getting picked week after week. And I don't know what that says to the players who are in training saying, do us a favour. If you're Curtis Jones, who's watching McAllister start ahead of him in big games, you must be thinking, well, that's a joke because I'm playing much better than him. If you're Joe Gomez, you must be thinking, look, I know I didn't play very well against Southampton, but I'm still better than that fella who's been atrocious for the entire season and yet just keeps getting picked again and again and again. I mean, you know, at right back, we don't really have a solution there. I thought, as I say, Curtis Jones played well, but we conceded 4 goals. So I can't look and say he's the answer to defence. So you know, Calvin Ramsey, obviously, you know, he's not anywhere near match fit. When he has played, he could barely do 45 minutes. But again, you know, it's almost like you need the manager to take a risk, to say, I'm going to roll the dice here, and I'm going to not go on the name on the team sheet. I'm going to go on the performances that we've been getting out of them. And where he's a bit hamstrung is that he just doesn't have the options in certain places. Like Cody Gakpo, I can't think of a thing in recent times, I'm sure there is one, can't think of a thing that annoys me as much as Cody Gakpo cutting in from the left-hand side and blasting the ball over the bar. I'm sure there's something that annoys me more than that, and there has been in the past. But by God, every time he cuts in, I'm like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. Oh, yeah, you've just it's over the bar, have you? Oh, good, okay. And, you know, look, the goal on the other night came from him cutting inside.
Yeah.
But even then, I was like, don't have a shot, because, you know, it's probably just going to go over the bar. And the shot was actually quite poor, and it was just quite lucky that the goalkeeper decided to just push it into the path of Szoboszlai. So, yeah, I think that what the manager needs to do is rip things up and start again, because going with the same thing and hoping that something will change this time, it's the old, that's the definition of madness. And so it's a ginormous week for his career, but it's a big week for Liverpool as a whole, because I don't know, if you said to me, I've heard it on the grapevine through, you know, the journalist patch and all the rest of it, that if he loses the next 2, he's getting sacked, I would say to you, who the hell's coming in then? And I know people will, like I've seen, so I saw one fella put a list of names the other day, and one of the names on the list was Lampard. And I was like, if you are honestly saying that you think Frank Lampard is the person to come into this Liverpool team and solve everything, then I don't know what to tell you. People who want him sacked have got to be careful what they wish for, because Eddie Howe was one of the names on the short list when Slot was brought in. Eddie Howe was one of the names on the list to replace Klopp. I do not think he is a serious proposition as a manager. I know they beat us in the League Cup last year and things, but I just think he's not a real manager. You're seeing at Newcastle, I think, what he would do at a top level club because of the money they've invested and everything, and they can't buy a win at the moment. So, you know, I've seen all sorts of names, and you just look and go, do we really think that Zinedine Zidane's going to come in? Do we really think Carlo Ancelotti is the right answer? Do we really think Filippo Inzaghi is the one that's going to? So, my biggest concern if we sack him, as I say, because I think the mourning of Diogo is a big old part of it. I think the injuries that we've been getting, the sheer bad luck we've been having, all of these things play into everything. So if we sack him and we bring somebody else in and nothing changes, what's next? What's the answer next? So that's the biggest thing. So what I think we need is 3 wins. And yes, people could turn around and say, well, you should be beating West Ham, who are shite, Sunderland, Leeds. Yeah, absolutely, you should be, but we haven't been. And if anything, they're 3 teams that terrify me. So, I think if you could offer me anything right now, I would say I would love to go behind in all 3 games and win all of them comfortably, because that would change so much about the direction of the season. It's a big week, but I think that's what needs to change to make things better.
Well, it is a big week. We'll have you covered with all of the fallout from all of those 3 games. But for now, thank you very much to Adam for joining us. Thanks to Milo for sorting out the audio and the pictures, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon.